I think the theme of this show is increasingly becoming, I really did. I warned people. I knew it was going to be bad. But I don't know if I knew to my core it was going to be this bad. And that applies a lot to what we're going to talk about in this segment. I want to go through more updates on the Trump, Putin, Zelensky nightmare that we're experiencing, where Trump every day is just becoming more and more vulgar and derogatory toward our ally Zelensky, and more complimentary and seemingly aligning himself with the interests of our adversary, Russia, as they continue their brutal invasion into Ukraine. We already went through some of those updates, but I have even more for you now, including Zelensky's response to some of Trump's recent statements, some reporting, and a Trump statement. If you appreciate the show and these updates, please do click the subscribe button and the like button. So here is the post that Trump sent out early this morning that just proves how unstable, but more than that, how disconnected from core values that I thought as Americans we all aligned with, that he actually is very disconnected from. He posted, "Think of it. A modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked to the United States of America into spending $350 billion. Now, that is factually not true. We already talked about the Telegraph saying Donald Trump told Fox News that Ukraine had essentially agreed, and that's the wrong part that I meant to read. Trump said the U.S. had spent $300 billion on the war so far, so he's increased the number, and he keeps increasing it, but adding that it would be stupid to hand over any more. In fact, the 5 packages agreed by Congress total $175 billion, and $70 billion was spent in the U.S. on weapons production. I've told you before, the old weapons that we would want to replenish anyways, or the Defense Department would replenish anyways, those old stuff and equipment will be sent to Ukraine, and then we're re-upping those things to replace them. But some of it was in the form of humanitarian grants, but much of it is lend-lease money that must be repaid. So he's just completely lying, now up to doubling the figure and also leaving out the loan part of it. But to continue forward with this deranged meltdown of a post, he says to go into a war that couldn't be won. So he's saying that Zelensky, a comedian, a modestly successful, insulting the leader of the victim country here. And he's saying that Zelensky convinced us into spending money that we didn't spend because he's lying, so that they could get into a war they couldn't win. They didn't get into a war. They didn't want this. They would be so happy if Putin would just withdraw his troops, stop invading, and this could be over. He said that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, and he puts himself in all caps and quotes, for a reason unknown, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. Again, he's just either lying or totally misinformed. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization, in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean. So as I've spent hundreds now of hours explaining, so you can find in other segments if you want more of an analysis, but I don't want to be super repetitive for our viewers who watch everything, of the importance to the United States of supporting Ukraine here, even if we cared zero, which we shouldn't, but even if we cared zero about the implications for Ukraine, the implications for us justify every single dollar that we've spent. But just to skip forward, because I'm getting exhausted with this, the key part, as you see highlighted here, is him saying, a dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Calling Zelensky a dictator, referencing the fact that while bombs are being dropped on the places where people would vote, and martial law is declared in the exact instance where martial law, or that martial law is crafted for, that somehow Zelensky is the dictator because elections can't proceed until they're even logistically possible given the current invasion. But he's calling Zelensky a dictator while never using that word for Putin. who is actually a dictator. And I saw that a journalist who's been covering Ukraine's defense of themselves, Andrew Roth, wrote, "For those of us who have lived and covered this war from 2014, and before it is hard," let me read this again because I botched the delivery. "For those of us who have lived and covered this war from 2014 and before, it is hard to imagine a more counterfactual, distorted, and frankly offensive interpretation of the last decade," describing that Trump is absolutely off of his rocker and deranged. I'll remind you one more time of him saying this yesterday.
"And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited." Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have.
Never says it's about Putin. Really think about that. Never says that about Putin, the one who invaded. Could every global conflict be handled better? Yes, in a very literal sense, leaders could always be better, could always handle things better. But that is wildly irrelevant, which is why I don't speak to that much until the key premise of this is Putin's war is accepted. If you can engage with that, if you can engage with what a war of aggression is definitionally, then we could talk about, all right, how could we play the global game better? How could we utilize rhetoric better? How could we craft a deal in the most effective way such that security guarantees are there for Ukraine and Putin is forced to stop? Is that possible? If we can do it, that'd be great. But why the heck would I, talk about the complexities of a car engine if someone doesn't even know what a car is? He doesn't know the basic reality that he's engaging with, as shown by him literally never. Like a little boy who's scared of his daddy, he never will use the language that he wrongly uses about Zelensky, about Daddy Putin.
Made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue.
They chose not to do it that way. I know we've talked about this clip already. I just can't get over it. It's exactly 30 seconds, and in a half of a minute, you learn everything you need to know about Trump's maliciousness and misunderstanding. Zelensky reacting here, saying that, well, let's just read this. Mediaite, Zelensky fires back at Trump's claim that Ukraine started war with Russia and says that Trump is living in a disinformation bubble. Now, this is a really big deal that he's having to say this. It's actually a nightmare that he's having to say this because he needs, as terrible as it is to have to placate Trump, he needs Trump to be thinking positively towards him. We've heard before that when Trump's asked about why he is supportive of Zelensky, however much he is, the times that he was more, what does he do every time? He tells the same story. When Zelensky was asked about Trump strong-arming him back during the 2019 impeachment, I think it was, of Trump, and him saying to Zelensky, essentially, we'll give you this stuff if you'll give me dirt on Biden, if you'll announce an investigation to Biden so I can say Biden's corrupt. And that quid pro quo at the center of that impeachment effort that Trump was impeached for, but obviously not convicted in the Senate, not removed from office. But when Zelensky was asked about it, I guess Trump liked his answer because Zelensky was like, oh, no, Trump didn't do anything wrong. Don't hurt me, Trump. And again, I say that not because I'm making fun of Zelensky, but because given the power of the United States, he does have to walk a very fine line. And so every time it comes up, Trump says, well, I like Zelensky because he was nice to me. Not, I see the victimization of Ukraine by Russia, or not, I see the global impact of resisting authoritarian regimes attempt to take over illegally, militarily, other people's countries because they want it. I see the long-term approach here from Putin, seeking to bring Russia back to its Soviet Union glory by targeting former USSR states. I see it all, and I see the importance of our support for them. He doesn't say that. He says, Zelensky is nice to me. So, as easily as he was convinced into kind of liking Zelensky by a small thing, he could be convinced out of it by feeling slighted. Which is so scary, but here it's a big deal that Zelensky is finally saying something pretty critical of Trump. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fired back at President Donald Trump's claim that Kiev, not Moscow, was responsible for the war that began with Russia's invasion in 2022 and accused him of living in a disinformation bubble. Yeah, he's living in a... Bubbles can be popped, his can't. He's living in a disinformation cave that's closed with a rock that's 1,000 feet down into the earth. Trump's remarks made at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday came as the U.S. and Russia held diplomatic talks. And that's sort of the context we've already gone through. So let's go to this quote here. Speaking in Kyiv on Wednesday, he said that Trump was pushing a lot of disinformation coming from Russia. Unfortunately, President Trump, with all due respect for him as the leader of a nation that we respect greatly, is living in this disinformation bubble. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty light way to say that Trump either... These are the two options, okay? Either he has some horrific intentions, or he took his brain out of his head and kicked it around like a soccer ball. Those are the two options. He either doesn't know what's going on, or he knows what's going on, and he doesn't give a damn how much destruction happens for Ukraine. But we should have seen this coming. Remember when Zelensky had to beg Trump to be more favorable towards Ukraine, our ally, a more democratic country, the non-aggressor, the victim country, than the murderous regime of Putin.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly.
And just playing an aggressive accordion there, as you can see. Just really, really trying to get some noise out of the air. I do think that's kind of a nervous tick. Because every time he starts to not really know what he wants to say, he just starts just absolutely moving his arms like that.
Very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, I see. Yeah, but you know, it takes two to tango, you know, and we're going to have a good meeting today.
It takes two to tango, he says. It takes two to tango. Well, maybe that's how he justified his sexual assault. But he should have learned from those that actually you can force something horrible on someone, and they can be a part of it without consenting to it. And that's what we're seeing here. That's the equivalent. Kayla Milton on our website, as I told you in a different segment, wrote about this, saying this is the equivalent. This kind of cheapens it, I think. But this is the equivalent logic of, well, what was she wearing? Right? Well, Ukraine must have done something to bring this onto themselves. Then Malcolm Turnbull, who's a former Australian Prime Minister, he has previously talked about how weird it is that Trump just salivates over Putin.
On a few occasions, he's like the 12-year-old boy that goes to high school and meets the captain of the football team. My hero. It is really creepy. It's really creepy. No,
And that struck you at the time?
Oh, absolutely. It struck everybody. It was like you could touch it. It was the creepiness was palpable.
Are you trying to say they're having a bromance?
No, I'm not saying. I'm just telling you what I saw. Regrettably, the Republican Party under Donald Trump, and particularly the right wing of the Republican Party, are very sympathetic to Vladimir Putin. I mean, I've been with Trump and Putin. Trump is in awe of Putin. Tyrants are often popular. You see, the key to democracy, liberal democracy, is that it empowers the majority, but it also, through the rule of law, constrains the majority. And if you get to the point where anybody who can muster a majority, and I don't think Trump can do that, by the way, but anyone who can muster a majority is given absolute power and then can do whatever they like to the minority, that's not a democracy. That is a tyranny. That is an autocracy, even if it's got the support of...
Right. And he ended up being right. Trump didn't get the majority, but he did get a plurality and didn't get enough, to win. So there was some laughter, but it is weird. So I see why there's sort of nervous laughter. Because the way that Trump, I mean, let me put it this way. How do I say? Trump has never looked at Melania the way that he looks at Putin. Does that make sense? And it's so creepy, but at the same time, it's not just a bromance as he worded it, or not just a strange, Trump, thinks that Putin has BDE or something, but instead that there's an ideological alignment. And that's what should freak us out. What principles does Trump find attractive that Putin is synced with? Well, it's not the ones that are supposed to make America America. And that we know for sure. And that's playing out on the world stage for us all to see. Share your thoughts in the comments.